The film look. There's something about the richness and vibrancy of it that it's no wonder so many creators look to emulate it. Maybe it's the deep color, the contrast, or the nostalgic emotion you get from emulating film that just gives it that punch. People complain it's being overused and oversaturated, but in all honesty, so what? If everyone's striving to get that same amount of quality and emotion in their color grade like some of the best creators that use it successfully, then personally, sign me up. I'm not saying color grading alone makes your film cinematic, because for me it's behind 1, storytelling, and 2, music and sound. But sometimes a creamy film look color can bleed into those two and amplify it when done correctly. So let's talk how and why I use certain film looks. Okay, first of all, I'm not a pro colorist or anything, so I'm going to appreciate any feedback or any criticisms that may come from this video if I've said anything wrong. But like I've mentioned several times, I'm still working on my color grading, and there's always room to improve. And that is what brings us to why I use Powergrades. And now, what are Powergrades? In short, and in basic terms, Powergrades are color grading templates. Basically, saved node structures of a color grading process. And now it pretty much has all the settings and node structure that the original user who created a Powergrade has when they made that certain look. As opposed to a LUT or a filter where you have the finished look, where you can't actually customize any aspect of that custom look. Whereas in a Powergrade, you can drill down to, let's say, the halation or the contrast of that look and amend it yourself. And now the Powergrades that I use are for Davinci Resolve, which brings us to my editing program, and that's in Davinci Resolve. Honestly, as a beginner, if you want to learn about color grading and get into it, Davinci Resolve is where it's at, speaking from personal experience. And now for this video, I'm not going to go too deep into the basics of color grading in Davinci Resolve, because there are much better creators that explain it way better than I can, such as my friend Daiki over here, or the color grading legend himself, Wakazukazi, who I learned a lot from starting out, and to this day still learning a lot of things from. Honestly, I suggest downloading Davinci Resolve. It's free, and of course watching tutorials from great creators like the people I mentioned. And now to the Powergrades that I use. Mainly, of course, I use Cineprint16. The other one that I started using recently is from Sir. And now I know a couple friends of mine are creating their own Powergrades, and one that I'm currently playing with now is from my friend Vincent, which is called the Ultimate Powergrade, which is just as good as the other two. And now let me show you how I use these specific Powergrades and why I use them. And now the first one I want to show you is Sir's Powergrade, which he calls FilmVision. This is the second version. And also I think this is one of the best at kind of mimicking that Kodak look. And the Powergrade structure itself is actually pretty light, as you can see. I know with these Powergrades, you can't just slap it on and expect the finished product to look like this. It's not a LUT, and even with LUTs, you're not even supposed to just slap it on. You're supposed to kind of build your grade using the LUT as a base. And this is pretty much the same, but a lot of heavy lifting. Also, Powergrades are really good at working with any kind of picture profile or log format from any camera, because typically they'll start with a color space transform where you input what log profile you shot in, and that transforms it into the profile that the person that created this grade was working in. And in layman's terms, that's what a color space transform in these Powergrades do. They basically kind of say, hey, I shot in Rec 709, transform that to S-Log3, just so when I'm working with a Powergrade that was built on S-Log3, then it's gonna be basically talking the same language. Again, with this Powergrade, you can't just slap it on, so you're gonna have to adjust stuff like the contrast. So for this, it's too flat for me, so I normally would add a little bit of contrast. The white balance, I love my warmer tones, so I always try to go warmer, as well as having some green tints. Right now, I'm not too much of a fan of grain because I find it a bit too noisy these days, so you can adjust the grain strength, or what I typically do is I just disable it, basically. So with Sir's grade, I like it in the Kodak 250. Now, I normally use FilmVision for some of my moodier stuff, or stuff where I kind of want it to really emulate that true film look. As you can see, the colors aren't too saturated. They're kind of almost muted, which I love, and it's almost like the Cine on film stock. And now to the main Powergrade that I mainly use, it's Cineprint, and that's what I've been putting on a lot of my recent footage. And clearly a lot of people love it because they're always asking, what LUT, what filter? Firstly, guys, it's not a LUT, it's a Powergrade. And obviously, I'm not a gatekeeper, so I always just say Cineprint16. But then I realized to a lot of people that may just fly over their heads is what exactly Cineprint is. But yeah, let me show you how I actually work with Cineprint. Again, let's apply the grade, Cineprint. And now look, I've seen a lot of people that kind of just leave it at this, not touch any of the settings thinking job done and this is what film looks like. But you definitely have to amend a lot of things in these settings. Like first of all, again, we're gonna go to the CST. Of course, I didn't shoot in ARRI. I shot in Sony S-Gamma 3 and S-Log 3. You can see that that's already kind of changed the image. And now I could clearly tell it's overexposed. So of course I'm gonna go to the exposure and just turn that down, and that's already miles better. And again, typically I've said it before, I remove the grain these days, I remove the blur, and again with a lot of film emulation they kind of add digital blur just so it's not as sharp and clinical as today's cameras. But I have a ProMist filter on all of my lenses which adds that bloom and kind of softens the image, so I feel like I don't need that blur as much. But for my stuff I still like to preserve some of that like 4K image and sharpness. So also for a lot of my footage I like the warmer tones. There's just something about that makes it feel really like nostalgic and literally warm. And also another thing I add is the tints. I push it to the green a little. I don't know why in my head, probably because of like one car wise stuff, like there's always that green tint. But yeah, that's probably why. Halation wise, I don't know if you can see, sometimes that's a little bit too strong, so I typically go over to the compound node and just decrease the threshold. I don't know if you can see here, but our skin looks a little bit too orange, and I got this tip from my friend Maynard where he just says go to extend subnode and just turn off skin 2. As you can see, that decreases the saturation in the skin, so we aren't looking like Oompa Loompas. And the main thing I like about Cineprint is the colors are a little bit more vibrant, especially when you switch to the print film Kodak stocks. This is what I kind of run, and this is what I basically use for a lot of my clips now. And also I like the way how Cineprint deals with the white balance. Instead of like adjusting the temp and tint on the log wheels, it's using the chromatic aberration, which I feel, especially with 10-bit footage, has way better control than the temperature. As you can see, like with temp, like the whole image is basically transformed, whereas here you can actually pretty much adjust it pretty precisely to your liking. But yeah, and that's pretty much how I work with Cineprint. There's way more settings in here that kind of like I would amend depending on the shot. But yeah, that's literally a quick rundown of like my color grading process. It's honestly just Cineprint and then light color grading on like my preferences. And that's probably one of the main reasons why I haven't really felt the need to create my own power grade, because a lot of stuff already exists out there, and like why would I even bother reinventing the wheel, you know? And yeah, hopefully me showing my process shows that it's not as hard as people think, and kind of inspires you to also kind of learn power grades and the tools that I've shown you from this video. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Film emulation, yeah.